everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, game masters, enthusiasts like Josh and myself. I am, of course, Dan. With me, of course, the aforementioned Josh.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing today?
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things knackical and perilous. I didn't have a word that ended in AL for that one, but we're going to talk about knacks for the first half of the podcast, and the second half of the podcast, things that are a danger to all of the characters out there that are playing. So first half, players; second half, game masters. Fast forward at your own peril.
The stuff we're going to be talking about in the second half is probably of some interest to players as well. Understanding how things like poisons and traps work certainly come in handy for people who interact with those things.
Yes. We're going to talk poisons and traps and curses and diseases. So, too late for your questions. We didn't actually get any questions on this one. So, if you have any questions after we're done, feel free to email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. But until then, Knacks. We haven't actually covered Knacks at all before.
We've touched on them briefly in some, sort of in passing in a couple of places, but we haven't really delved into them in any kind of depth. So that's what we're going to do now.
A little bit of depth. We're not going to cover every single knack one at a time. That would
we're going to talk about the rules of learning them, what their purpose is. We're going to talk about using them. We're going to use some examples to provide. We're going to cover some of the really low rank early knacks that are available, basically as sort of examples. But that's, there's way too many knacks between the companion and mystic paths. There are pages and pages and pages of knacks. But understanding kind of generally how they work and what their purpose is, you can then look at them and understand.
Yeah. I just played on Sunday, and I had a bunch of legend points handed my way, and after I spent them on raising a couple of talents, I'm like, dang it, I should have looked at some knacks, because I'm, fourth, almost fifth circle, and I've got a whole bunch of talents rank 4. I could probably pick up some knacks. I didn't do it, so I'm kicking my own ass on that one, but we can get started on just learning some knacks. So pretty much, let's go over exactly what a knack is. You have a talent for something. You therefore have a knack for it. I love the verbiage used in Earthdawn for those things. But a knack, essentially, how do you want to summarize a knack in like a sentence or less?
So knacks are basically special use cases or enhancements to the normal use of a magical talent. And there are a few different flavors of them. There are some that basically allow you to substitute a different effect for a talent. There are some that allow you to perform special maneuvers. Anybody who's looked at creatures and knows some of the special maneuvers that are available, like crack the shell or things like that, where you can spend extra successes to do things against a creature. There are knacks that are basically special maneuvers where you can spend successes from a talent test in order to have a particular effect. And then there are some knacks that basically just give you access to other abilities. For example, the air sailing talent has knacks that when you are skilled enough in air sailing, you also may gain the ability to learn to do regular sailing. That sort of thing, where you get access to usually skills that would be connected to that talent. And so you can then just spend a few hundred legend points and effectively have a skill at the same rank as its associated talent, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I wrote it down as knacks are a one-shot learn, because you cannot improve them, but they're just a small little branch off of a base talent that you already have.
One way that we kind of think about it from a design perspective, and it's not completely accurate, but is to think of in the same way that sort of spells are connected to the spellcasting talent, and you have to spend legend points to learn a spell, knacks are connected to other talents, and you spend a one-time cost to learn them and get access to their utility for you.
Fair. The basics of...
One clarification on what you just said there, now that I mention it, there are some knacks that can be learned as skills, the same way that talents can be potentially learned as skills. If you learn a knack as a skill, it has its own, it does in that case have ranks, and it is advanced and purchased as if it is a normal skill. And it only does the thing that it describes. You don't have, like, say, melee weapons as a skill, and then you take a melee weapons knack under it. You then have, like, a separate skill that shares the name of a melee weapons knack, but it has its own rank and is based off of that for the purposes of advancement and so forth. This does allow some of the less mystical knack abilities to be available to non-adept characters, NPCs and so forth, to perhaps allow them to have the occasional useful trick or, that sort of thing to spice up conflicts or whatever.
Well, yeah, just to flesh out your NPCs a little bit more and make them more individually unique, which I know is kind of a redundant right there. But yeah, I think that adding those in there would be cool. So let's clarify real quick. If you learn a knack as a talent, can you use karma on it?
Yes, because in most cases when you are using the knack, you are still using the talent. The knack just unlocks a different use or a different effect of the talent. And so you're still making a talent test. You're still rolling the dice for the talent. You can therefore spend karma on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you learn the knack under a skill, same rules apply, cannot use karma on it, correct?
Right, because it's a skill.
Okay. Making sure.
Because you can't spend karma on because barring discipline abilities that allow you to spend karma on certain kinds of tests, you can't spend karma on skills as a general rule.
Yes. So, making sure that was clarified for everybody under the whole Knacks umbrella we're going to talk about here.
Yes.
So, other than that, you cannot learn talent Knacks learned as talents through Versatility, the Versatility talent. Okay. Last clarification. That was all I wanted to cover for everybody who's listening in case we get any questions on it. Wanted to just beat those to the punch, and punching is a knack. Kidding. So you have to know the basic talent first in your discipline progression, discipline talent or discipline option talent, take your pick, and you have to know it at a certain rank to learn that knack, because they are therefore unlocked at a certain rank. Because some of them are like rank 1, fine. You have a talent at rank 1, you can get this knack at rank 1, which is not very many, but there's a couple. Whole bunch are unlocked at rank 3. But if you get to like rank 5 or rank 7, that's when you get some like really cool knacks, which we're not going to talk about today.
Yeah, the relative power of a knack and what it can do is connected to the rank that it becomes available at. Yeah, it's not like, for example, this is not the case in 4th edition. Like, this doesn't really hold true anymore. But in 1st edition, knacks were originally introduced in 1st edition. And for example, in 1st edition, the riposte talent could only riposte melee combat attacks.
Right.
There were knacks that became available to riposte as you got higher ranks in the riposte talent that allowed you to claw riposte being one of them. That one I think did make it over to 4th edition.
Unarmed
that allows you to use riposte against unarmed combat. There was also a missile weapon riposte, which I don't think deflected the missile back at the opponent, but still allowed you to defend, and spell riposte, which was scary, that basically allowed the swordmaster to use riposte to deflect spells back at the caster. That I know is not
in 4th edition.
Is not 4th edition, because that's kind of going outside the scope of what knacks really should be able to do. It really shouldn't do, in a lot of cases, generally should not be able to do something that does not make real sense with regards to the talent. Deflecting spells with riposte seems really weird because spells target mystic defense, whereas riposte is always a defense against a physical defense attacking ability.
I like the example, and I like the fact that it's not in 4th edition, so we can we can clarify that one last time before we get questions on it. Where is that one? I want that one. No, we can't have that one. So the last thing about learning the knacks is you have to have the legend points to spend on purchasing them.
Yes.
And they're at a certain tier.
So knacks always are cost based off of the novice legend point column.
Yes.
And the cost is, it basically sort of costs, again, kind of like spells. If it's a rank 3 knack, then it costs the equivalent of buying rank 3 of the talent, which is to say 300 legend points. If it's a rank 5, then it would cost 800. If it's only rank 1, it only costs 100. But that's a one-time cost. It is just that rank. It is not the sum of everything up to that point.
So, wanted to clarify that because I knew it was only one tier.
Yep, it's always off of the novice column, and it's just based off of the minimum rank. Regardless of when you learn it, it's based off of the minimum rank that the knack becomes available to that talent.
All right, so we've covered all of the preamble on learning knacks. So let's get down to the brass tacks and actually...
Well, one other thing that you didn't cover. So we talked about the requirement, which is to say that you need to know the associated talent at a certain minimum rank. Some knacks, especially the ones in Mystic Paths, frequently have other restrictions that you need to meet some other requirements in order to use it.
Yes.
Like, for example, in Mystic Paths, the Fire Eater path has a whole bunch of knacks, but in order to learn any of them, you not only need to be a Fire Eater, but you know, that requires you to be an orc. Basically because you need to have Jihad because that's their whole thing revolves around. So some knacks you may see other restrictions. To clarify, the character must meet all of the requirements and at least one of the restrictions. Like that's kind of the breakdown. If the restriction has 3 different disciplines that you need to be, you only need to be following one of them. You don't need to be following all 3.
For an exact example, to your point, under melee weapons on page 101 in the companion, there is the special maneuver of Overpower, which has a requirement of rank 7 for your melee weapons, but the restriction is you have to have a minimum strength of 14.
Correct. So you need to have melee weapons at rank 7, and you need to have a strength of 14 in order to do that.
Yeah. So just as an example to Josh's point, some of them have a requirement and a restriction. So, okay. That's the learning.
Yeah, I'm trying to flip through here real quickly. I don't know. Oh, the ones where, in the companion, the ones where you're going to see the multiple requirements.
Yes.
Are the enchanting knacks primarily. For example, Create Orichalcum, which is on page 117, has restrictions Elementalist 9, Weaponsmith 10. You need to either be a 9th Circle or higher Elementalist or a 10th Circle or higher Weaponsmith in order to do that. You do not need to be both.
Yeah. It's either or. It's why there's a comma. Not an
But that's just a clarification, an example. Because not everybody has Mixed Paths. The people who are using knacks would presumably have at least the companion. So there's an example.
Yeah. We're gonna do most of them out of the companion. We're gonna do one. I can't say one book at a time, but we're gonna get the overall gist of things for knacks. So, anything else about learning? I think we kind of hit all of the high points for what it takes to learn a new knack.
So, generally speaking, knacks are most commonly learned while you are advancing in your circle.
Mm-hmm.
You should be learning it from a trainer who already knows it. If you do, you basically just, it takes some time, not a lot, takes a little bit of time training. It is possible to develop knacks on your own, to not have a trainer. There aren't really strong rules on that in the companion, but if you're having problems for whatever reason finding somebody who knows the knack to train you, it is possible to develop it on your own, but generally the amount of time required to do that would be greater.
Kind of like learning a skill versus a talent.
Yeah, sort of, maybe.
Just gotta spend more time doing it. So no hard and fast rule, just more time than you'd normally take to do it. Okay, on to the using of knacks. And I got a couple of little notes here, but otherwise feel free to fill in because obviously you're the line developer, one among the team. So basically there's one knack per use of a talent. So it could replace the talent use.
Generally speaking, yes. The knack. So there's 2 different things there. Knacks, and there's errata on this for the ones in the companion. Mm-hmm. The knack may be noted as standard effects. And what that means is that the normal use of the talent applies and the knack provides something in addition to that. If the knack does not say standard effects, then only the knack applies, and you can only use one, unless it specifically indicates otherwise in the text, you can only use one knack per talent per use of the talent.
Okay. I also have down that the number of knacks per talent equals the base talent rank.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, except maybe for spellcasting knacks, I mean, I don't think, in the companion at least, I don't think there are enough knacks to make that actually be an issue.
Fair.
I mean, it depends. Like, I don't have like a comprehensive list in front of me of how many knacks and what ranks they are for each of the talents.
No.
But I don't think there are... Well, okay. Melee weapons has a bunch, and there's like 1, 2 at rank 4, 3 at rank 6. So that's 5. So you could still learn all 5 of those because you need to be at least rank 6. So, like, it doesn't look like... I mean, it's possible that there might be situations where you might need to choose, but yeah.
That's okay. I just love the fact that there are multiple options for each talent.
Yeah.
So
in some cases, some talents only have 1 or 2 knacks available to them for whatever reason.
I made a whole list on Excel. I could line up which talent knacks were for which talent, but I didn't bother to print it out for this one because we're not going to go over all of them. Again, a big waste of my time. Just kidding. So other than that, but the lowest action step for whatever you're doing, you have to also take the greatest action time in using your knack.
Oh, right. Yeah, because it's... Sure, it depends on what the... some knacks, because of what they're doing, might change a standard action to a sustained action.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever. So you would use the information in the knack generally takes priority over the normal rules for the talent.
Yeah, and if you're trying to combine 2 knacks at the same time, because it is possible, we can't say it's not because there's 100 or so knacks here. If you're going to combine one effect with another effect, doesn't matter. You got to take the greatest action time, so you can't like pull 2 simple actions off versus that. But also, you have to take the total strain of all the things you're doing at the same time because that's putting some effort forth.
Yeah.
Not just get, I'll take the higher of the strain. No. All the strain.
The information given in the companion, the blocks, the kind of game information blocks for each of the knacks, that information replaces the normal stuff for the talent. So in some cases, you might see that it's based off of a different attribute. You'll see different strain costs. You might see different types of actions. The information given for the knack takes priority. And there are some situations where you might have multiple knacks that apply. You play all of the strain costs for all of the knacks, and the action type ends up being whatever the highest action type is. Yeah. Again, a lot of that depends on what you're mixing together.
Fair enough. So do you want to cover enchanting knacks now as its own little separate thing and kind of explain how those work? Because that's a whole separate, I can't say chapter.
Yeah,
but that's
basically
kind of separate. Yeah,
enchanting knacks are basically extra costs that you need to pay. You need to pick up the knowledge of how to magically create stuff. If you are not going to be using it, say, with the alchemy skill, which, a significant number of the common magic items and healing aids and poisons and stuff like that can just be made with alchemy. You don't need to get into knacks at all in order to do them. But if for some reason you're not taking the alchemy skill and you want to be able to enchant items, there are knacks that are available that basically allow disciplines that are associated with creating certain items to be able to create those items. Weaponsmiths, elementalists, nethermancers, wizards, less so. Illusionists can as well, although I think, looking through the list here, the only one that they can do is they can craft true pattern, which allows them to make thread items. They can incorporate glyphs, which basically allows them to make magic matrix items.
Mm-hmm.
But like illusionists are not big on the enchanting thing the way that some other disciplines are. But that's basically all that enchanting knacks are, is you need to spend some legend points and pick up the special ability, usually based off of thread weaving, in order to be able to create magic items as described in the enchanting chapter of the same book.
Fair enough. So, and then I've got one more little note on using a knack, and that is, please, for all of the listeners' edification, define a special maneuver knack.
Those are basically ones that allow you to spend extra successes from a test to do a particular effect. Like, for example, you mentioned the overpower knack earlier. That is a melee weapons knack. What that allows you to do is you can spend 2 additional successes off of your attack test to force the target to make a knockdown test. That is in addition to, so like basically you don't need to have declared that you're attacking to knockdown. You can decide that after the fact if you roll high enough that you're going to use the knack. You still hit them as normal. They make a test, and it not only knocks them down if they fail, but it also knocks them back a number of yards, like basically moves them, like pushes them back based on the result.
You get some distance between you and them.
It does require a 2-handed weapon in order to do that, but it's basically, a special maneuver. Give ground is another one that kind of provides you. It's a variation of the old giving ground combat option. It's now basically explicitly tied as a knack off of melee weapons that allows you to sort of do that same thing where you can give ground to boost your physical defense. So that's basically what those are. Those have the standard effects and allow you to spend successes to do other stuff. And this is the knacks are really another place where the new success system of 4th edition, where you have sort of unlimited successes for every 5 points over, allows us to play in some design space that allows us to do some fun things with those knacks.
Well, and I like the fact that a couple of the combat options have now been worked into specific scenarios where a knack could be used instead. So it just shows the progression of, I'm good at this talent, now I have a knack for it, I can now make this into a combat option. As you said, giving ground versus anybody can give ground. No, there's a special way to do it. You've been trained for it. There's a knack for it. Proceed.
Right.
So, okay, on to our actual list of knacks. So I found a few knacks that actually come in at rank 1. So you can have a rank 1 emotion song, rank 1 haggle, or a rank 2 navigation to get these 3 specific knacks. Telling the tale under emotion song, evaluate under haggle, and map making under navigation. So
yes,
I think we just kind of break down the telling the tale real quick. So like I said, it's only rank 1. There's only 2 rank 1 knacks of the entire companion. Not touching Mystic Paths, but just the entire companion. And this one is expands the repertoire for use of the emotion song talent. Instead of singing, they can perform any artistic activity such as storytelling, reciting poetry, or even performing a puppet show. Using this knack does not count as using a knack for any limitations. You can take it as a skill, but this is one way for troubadours to just kind of enhance what they can do. Instead of basically having an actual song, they can just tell a tale instead, right up the troubadour's alley.
It's to allow a little bit of flexibility potentially in terms of the troubadour's magic. Emotion song is kind of focused specifically on musical performance in terms of its effect. And for those troubadours who might have other ways, that sort of expansion of the magic, for 100 legend points, you can basically use that emotional manipulation magic in any kind of public performance situation.
And moving on to haggle, I love the fact that you can pick this up for the measly 100 legend points to pick up the talent knack under haggle and get evaluate, which I think is very underrated as far as an ability to have.
This is a situation where this was an ability that was sort of available intermittently in previous editions. Like the Thief in 1st edition had like a evaluate metal that you, or something like that, where you could, or maybe it was Weaponsmith. I forget now off the top of my head because I don't have the first.
I think it was. I know Weaponsmith had haggle and evaluate.
Right.
I think as
well. But it was like just a discipline
on.
Ability where they could spend strain or whatever and be able to evaluate the price of an item.
Yeah. It
is not something that really requires a full-blown talent to be able to do, but where haggle is sort of a general mercantile negotiate your price talent, having an ability linked to that where you can actually appraise the value of an item ties very nicely in that, but it's also a really kind of basic ability, and so it's something that can be picked up right off of the bat. Especially
exactly.
Once you get a little bit of experience under your belt. 100 legend points is a minor...
It's like the basic
minor
fee
investment.
On anything. Very minor inconvenience for a very useful thing to do. Because again, after you increase your rank in haggle, to rank 4 or 5 or 6, you're rolling evaluate at that rank when you use it. So picking it for 100 points at any point at any given time is wonderful for evaluate. That it saves you a whole bunch of coin later on. So on to navigation and map making, which again is highly underrated, but it's basically the skill listed in the player's guide. You just, like I said, have a magical knack for it under your navigation.
This is an example of one of those where it makes a lot of sense for somebody who is able to navigate to be able to make maps as a result of that. And so rather than requiring somebody to basically spend points in the skill, if they hadn't already, in order to increase their, in order to take advantage of that. One thing I do want to mention, because navigation is a free talent for scouts, for example.
Yes. I was just going to bring this up.
You can still buy knacks for those where appropriate. There aren't a lot of examples of those. There are no craftsman knacks, but navigation being, the way that it is, I would certainly say that if your scout did not take map making as a general skill, then you could, when they reach second circle, at that point, their navigation automatically raises to rank 2, and they would qualify to be able to pick up the map making knack if you wanted to allow that.
Because I don't think map making is a game breaker.
No.
I think that'd be just fine. So now we get to spend the next few minutes talking about Josh's favorite part that he wanted to bring up a while ago. All the, as you call them, cantrips for the spellcasting.
That's the term that I coined, that we kind of refer to them like when we're just kind of talking about them. They are not called that at any point in any of the official text. It's just a nice little shorthand. They are spellcasting knacks. And most of these, what they allow you to do is it gives spellcasters, it gives magicians a little something extra, that they can basically use spellcasting to do some really, relatively speaking, low-powered, semi-innocuous effects.
Because these are all available at spellcasting rank 2, which means you spend 200 legend points per each one of these. You broaden what you can do with your spellcasting.
Yeah. And this is the only place potentially, and they are discipline specific. So there are multiple ones at rank 2. I think there are 4 of them, but like 1 per discipline. There might be 5 if you include the shaman. I think shaman might have one that's in Mystic Paths.
Yeah.
But basically the idea is that it would take your normal spellcasting action to do, but the real purpose of these is if you are weaving a thread that round, like you are preparing to cast a spell in the future, you can use these knacks as a simple action that same round. So, what you could do is use that to set up a future spell that you're casting, or do something to help out your allies a little bit, that sort of thing, to reduce somewhat the frustration that can come along with playing a spellcaster if you've got a spell that's requiring a lot of threads, or if you're not having a great night and not successfully weaving the threads for your spell, you still have stuff that you can do as part of that. These are, they're minor effects. They don't increase with any kind of extra successes on the spell casting. They're a fixed effect, but they're all kind of connected thematically with the type of stuff that secondary effects from that discipline's spells tend to have.
Well, so now that we've teased them, let's actually describe a couple of these. So let's begin with alphabetically. Acid Splash.
Acid Splash. This is an elementalist knack. Basically, within a target within 10 yards, they make a spell casting test against the target's mystic defense, and if successful, impose a -2 penalty to that target's physical armor until the end of the next round. This is really nice. I mean, reducing armor, it's basically the secondary effect that you get from earth darts.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't last. I mean, it lasts a round basically, but if you can consistently, it costs 1 point of strain, so it's not free.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can reduce a target's physical armor by a couple of points as you're preparing something like, say,
huge.
if you're preparing like, say, a lightning bolt or ice mason chain, which actually I don't think requires any threads. I forget. I don't think it does.
Not a
Blizzards, like any of the, elementalist spells pretty much always target physical defense. And so if you can, hit them with that beforehand, then it's going to be more effective when you hit them with that, when you hit them with a physical damage spell after the fact.
And again, 200 points to reduce somebody else's armor. That's nothing to sneeze at, because reducing armor is really hard to do otherwise in 4th edition. Okay, on to arcane accuracy. This is for wizards.
With this one, the wizard basically chooses an ally and makes a spellcasting 6 test, so it doesn't even have to beat the target's mystic defense. It's just a target number 6, a flat difficulty.
Yeah.
If successful, the target gains a +2 attack, +2 to their next attack test targeting physical defense.
Not bad.
Boop, you hit the warrior or the swordmaster with that, and it provides a boost for them to potentially be more successful with their attacks.
Again, 200 legend points. This is easy. Astral
and that
Strain.
one doesn't even cost any strain.
Yeah, that one's nice and easy. Astral Strain costs some strain. But this one's for Nethermancers.
Yes. Astral Strain is Nethermancers. This reduces the target's mystic defense in the similar way that Acid Splash reduces physical armor. Astral Strain reduces the target's mystic defense, which is great. If you are you use that to prep, oh, hey, I successfully used it against you. Your mystic defense is 2 points lower. It is easier for me to follow that up with an astral spear or
any other
Nethermancer spell that is targeting. And since it reduces defense, it doesn't even need to be a damaging spell. It just makes them more susceptible.
It doesn't have a requirement of touch.
No, they've got to be within 10 yards, so it is kind of close range. Mm-hmm. But it's still... It's, a nice little...
Yeah, within 10 yards, I can just lower your mystic defense before I hit you with the spell. Awesome. 200 points. Well spent. Right there. Astral Ward. This is again for wizards.
This is a wizard one. This provides a willing target of an ally within 10 yards with a +2 bonus to their mystic defense. Basically boosts them against incoming spell attacks or attacks.
Yeah, for point of strain, you can give an ally a +2 mystic defense. Worth the strain, I would say.
Can be.
But that's just me. Befuddle, which I just love the name of. This is for illusionists.
This is an illusionist knack. If successful against the target suffers a -2 to their social defense until the end of the next round. Nice because illusionists, as we discussed in our episode with them, tend to play a lot more with interaction tests and social defense and things like that. An interesting thing that you can use to set up ahead of time, even if you are not using it to cast a spell, penalizing social defense, use it to set up your Swordmaster's taunt or battle shout. If you've got a Sky Raider in the party, any kind of penalty that you can apply to that can enhance, what your allies might be doing, or your own thing that might be targeting social defense as well.
Or isn't Nethermancer's Frighten based upon social defense?
No, Frighten is based on Mystic.
Okay, that's where I get that one lost. Anyway, on to Courage, which of course is just
Courage is the other illusionist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, if successful, it provides a bonus to the allies' initiative
test for a close combat attack. So it's a +1 initiative
for the next close combat. So it basically is a little bit of a speed boost.
Exactly. Take that and run. And then we're down to Fortify Armor.
This is the other elementalist one that's available early on. It allows them to buff their allies' physical armor by 2.
Yeah, nice. Again, all these are worth just 200 legend points. One-time shot. Done. You get these anytime you want to do this after that. So, yeah, worth a point of strain on that as well. And then Unsettle.
Yeah, Unsettle is Nethermancer. This is sort of a kind of fear-based one. The target, if successful, suffers -2 to willpower-based tests until the end of the next round, which basically makes it harder for them to throw off the effects of something like Frighten or anything else that might have a willpower, that allows a willpower test to resist or shake off.
Right there, 11 knacks you can get first or second rank in Emotion Song, Haggle, Navigation, or a boatload of them for spellcasting to really up your mage's proficiency in anything left and right. So I think that's not a bad little recap or a little introduction to what knacks can do. And it reminds me, I need to go take a look at some knacks for what my scout can actually do in 4th edition, because I didn't do it this last time, but next time. I'm all over the knacks.
The knacks are organized by talent type. So all of the knacks based off of Anticipate Blow, for example, are listed under Anticipate Blow. So, what you would want to do is kind of go through your character's talents and look at, what knacks, if any, are available, and if there are any that interest you in terms of picking them up.
It's really fun. I look forward to any questions we get on some knacks about how some may have been written or how good they are if they replace a talent. We try to cover that at the beginning of the episode, but otherwise, I hope this actually incentivizes people or inspires people to go look up little bits of flavor they can add to their character that they hadn't maybe thought about before. So since you're playing in a podcast, Legends of Earthdawn, has Virag picked up any knacks just yet? I already said I forgot to look mine up, so...
Virag does know a couple of knacks. I don't think... Let's see. Virag knows Astral Strain. We talked about that one. Virag knows Unsettle. We talked about that one. And Virag also picked up Bleed, which is another Neithermancer spellcasting knack that is available a little bit higher. That is the one that reduces the target's wound threshold. We actually talked about that. We had a question, an email question about a spell that reduced the target's wound threshold, and that is a knack that she knows as well, which reduces the target's wound threshold by 2.
It just sounds...
I've not had much opportunity to use them very much. I'll be honest, I kind of sort of forget that they're there, in part because they all kind of need to be used at relatively close range, and I try to not be that close to stuff.
Fair. That's the job of the spellcaster, is to not necessarily be up close. Troll or not, your job is not to necessarily be up close if you can help it. All right, we got 40 minutes in on knacks. That's not too bad, actually. So on to the perilous part of the podcast. All alliteration aside, we're going to talk about poisons, traps, curses, and diseases. And exactly, I can't say how they came about, but how they might differ in 4th edition, because I know you made a point a while ago when the books were coming out to say that they've been, poisons especially, I think, were upgraded as far as the mechanics were concerned from previous editions to now.
Both poisons and diseases kind of work on the same rules framework.
Yeah.
Basic idea that poisons have a step, which is basically sort of a relative measure of how powerful they are. How potent they are. Diseases are the same way. They'll have a step. They've got a duration, which is to say how long they last. They've got an onset time, basically how long before the effect of the poison or disease actually, from exposure, before it actually starts having an effect. And then they have the sort of the new bit in 4th edition is what I called the interval, which basically is that in most cases, for the sake of verisimilitude, for realism, to maybe try and model how poisons and diseases kind of work, which is to say they work over time as opposed to being a single event.
Yes.
That they make multiple tests over the course of a period of time, and how often you make those tests during that period is the interval. So if you have a poison that is, say, onset instant, so it basically goes to take effect right away, but it's got an interval of 4/1 round, it means there's a total of up to 4 tests that can be made for the poison to affect you, and those tests are made every round. Now, fortunately, the player character does get a chance to resist that every round by making a toughness test against the step of the poison. And then you can have poisons and diseases as well that either just do straight damage. You don't really tend to see diseases that do that much, but poisons can certainly do damage. Then you've got debilitating and paralytic. Paralysis poisons and debilitating. And basically what those do is rather than doing damage, they impose penalties. And if those penalties reach a certain point, then they incapacitate the character, the victim in some way. Well, yeah, they need a poison or disease needs to specifically indicate that it is deadly in order for it to actually be fatal in that regard.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be like a paralytic poison, the idea being that it puts the target to sleep or paralyzes them without killing them is certainly an option, as opposed to, like, say, a neurotoxin that might also be paralytic but would kill them because the paralysis strikes the heart and stops the heart beating or prevents the target from breathing or whatever, and kind of kills them from secondary effects. But the ongoing penalty kind of determines how much it is affecting them. That enhancement sort of to the nod to realism for how those things work does end up with poisons and diseases being a little bit more fiddly than they have been in the past.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
I think what it allows to happen is basically allow some time for healing aids like the Kelix's poultice or Kelia's antidote to be applied.
Yeah, or
things like that.
Disease, things like that.
Yeah. The one thing that you can kind of do with poisons is it's possible that you don't necessarily need to have the step or rank be both the difficulty to resist and the effect test. Is that in theory what you could do is you could have a poison that has a very high resistance rank, that is to say the target number for your toughness test to shake off the effects of it could be very high, making it a very difficult poison to resist, but it might have a long duration or an interval with a large number of tests made like every couple of rounds, but a relatively low effect test in terms of how much damage it might do, so that what you could have is a poison that does not kill the target instantly, but might, if not treated, will accumulate damage and potentially cause problems for the target that way. So there are basically, there are some more variables that are in play there in terms of how you can tune a poison or disease to have the kind of to have sort of the mechanics reflect the narrative of what it should be doing.
I like the fact that it's got all of those four things: the effect, the onset time, the interval, and the duration. All of those four things can play into, as you said, the narrative, helping to tell the story as to what happens to that character or characters along the way and what problems that causes for team dynamic, resources, and where they can get to in the plot. As in, well, now we've been waylaid because two of our party members have been, stung by this thing and they're poisoned. So we need to sidetrack and go over here and or build the alchemy, use the alchemy skill and build your poultice or your antidote, or go find some healers of Garland and take that road. So you have a little side trek every once in a while because it will waylay your party if somebody is deeply affected by a poison or disease. In reading the poisons, I counted there's 15 listed. Most of them have the effects of the effect step of between 5 or 10. So there's a nice range, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 for the effect steps. So the amount of damage you can deal out is significant per dose. 5 of them, so a third listed, have an instant onset time. So they are very rapid acting. And 2 have a permanent duration. So you got some nice variables to play with.
Witherfang Venom, I think, being one of them, where if it affects you and causes the problem, then it lasts until the appropriate healing measures are applied. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we're not talking about death being a permanent thing, although it can be and is generally.
Absolutely. So really, just to get over, just to clarify real quick, once you roll your toughness and beat the effect step number, right?
That's
the rank of the poison.
It's done.
Or the disease. It's gone. That's it. You're healed. Your body's purged it. You're taken care of. So just to clarify, poisons are nasty. They can be overcome.
Yeah.
Same with disease.
Especially, so when you consider that most normal people, and of course player characters aren't normal people, they are adepts, but even then, unless you're talking about someone who has specifically, like, most characters are going to have toughness steps of 5 to 7 depending on their race and discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And so are not necessarily going to have great normal odds for resisting a poison right away or a disease right away. Because if you're looking at like their difficulties, their ranks start at 5 and kind of go up from there. The odds of someone with a step 6 toughness being able to resist a rank 10, a step 10 poison, that's only a 10% chance that they're going to do it on any individual roll. But they get multiple rolls to do it. But this is where bonuses from healing aids, the Cold Purify talent is another, is one that helps you resist that. There's a toughness-based talent. I don't know if we've talked about it with any of the disciplines thus far, or if it doesn't become available until later, that basically provides a bonus to resist poison and disease. I think that there's a talent that's an optional talent for some disciplines that allows that.
Is that Iron Constitution?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, no, that becomes available. So it's an optional talent because if you aren't dealing with poisons and disease a lot in your game, it's not great to have as a discipline talent that you're never going to be using.
But surprise, you could at any point in time.
But surprise, you could. I mean,
deal with
poisons definitely. I mean, a lot of
Absolutely.
Dangerous creatures have poison or venom of some sort that you. I mean, ghouls being sort of the iconic example of that.
Oh, Shadowmance too.
Poison. Yes. Shadowmance, ghouls, yeah.
To your point, Witherfangs. I found probably my favorite disease, not for 2020, but I think there's an eerie similarity to something going on in the world right now. This disease is usually contracted in cold and damp regions, but this is only for Earthdawn. But here's the other part. It takes a while to manifest, sometimes a few months. The incubation period marked by congestion and coughing, labored breathing, and a mild fever. While the illness's slow progression usually allows for successful diagnoses and treatment, the disease is fatal if left untreated for too long. Victims of an extended bout can suffer from shortness of breath, weakened constitution for the rest of their lives. Is that COVID? Or is that lung rot from Earthdawn?
That's lung rot from Earthdawn, which bears a resemblance to any number of nasty respiratory diseases that exist in the wild.
So I was just reading over this for the preparation for the podcast and said, wow, they were prescient when they wrote this one. Because now we have COVID, very, very similar. So had to point that out in case you have characters who just need to take a little break, a little while, throw some lung rot at them. Why not? Fun stuff. So we haven't talked about traps or curses. And those are the two major obstacles. If you watch Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The wonderful pronunciation there. So traps are very commonplace throughout all of Earthdawn. I've been running those in the pre-gen adventures for decades now. I think almost every single one of them has had a trap of some kind, magical or mundane. Have they been improved or any new wrinkles for 4th edition mechanic-wise?
No, not really. Basically traps have a detection difficulty, that is the ability to notice that there is in fact a trap there. That's the target number to see it on a perception or awareness
Hey,
test.
I noticed it.
They have an initiative, which basically if you trigger the trap, you roll the initiative and the potential victim of the trap needs to beat that initiative in order to have a chance of avoiding it somehow.
Because the game master rolls the initiative step for the trap. So it's a roll off.
Well, I mean, it's sort of kind of like going into combat at that point is that everybody that is potentially involved in that interaction, that conflict rolls initiative, and the highest initiative acts first. Mm-hmm. So if the trap rolls first, then the trap goes off and you can't do anything about it. If you roll higher than the trap, then you have a chance to react.
Get out of the way.
That reaction may or may not save you from the trap, but it does at least give you a chance to act. And Danger Sense gives you a second opportunity to react if that initial initiative test or gives you a bonus to your initiative for the purposes of avoiding traps. Traps also have a disarm difficulty, which is the target number for using disarm trap, the talent, to make it not effective. They have a trigger condition. This is basically narratively like, what is it that sets the trap off? Is it a pressure plate? Is it a magical ward of some sort? Whatever it might be.
Tripwire.
And then it has an effect. Does it do damage? Does it whatever? And see the sort of trigger and effects can vary depending on what the trap is. Your standard cave-in trap is just going to do damage, stuff like that.
a spiked pit trap, and all kinds of things. And there's technically, I mean, there's a few examples are given in the Game Master's Guide, as there should be. And I'm not sure anything was ever cut for space, because don't think that whatever's in this guide is all there is for traps. There's a myriad. If you whatever you can think of, knock yourself out. I have one suggestion, which is Knights of the Dinner Table magazine, which I read, has been putting out a trap of the month in their bait and tackle section for literally the last decade or more. So there's at least 120 other kinds of mundane traps in there. So if you're looking for ideas, go mining. They've got oodles and oodles and oodles. So I love the fact that traps were one of those things that were, I can't say perfect, but haven't evolved or changed or needed to change.
Yeah,
from
I
first
mean,
edition to now.
what else? The stuff with traps is basically, like the basic mechanics in terms of detection, disarm, and initiative. That's the stuff that you kind of need to know. And then at that point, it's the, like, how does it work and what's the effect? That's the place where you can kind of get a little creative and whatnot. Like, for example, the blade trap, right? The first example trap that's in the GM's guide, page 181, has, it not only does this large blade come out of the wall and actually deal damage, but it also has a chance of poisoning the target. Or like your classic sort of poison dart trap in the chest or whatever. You can combine poisons and diseases and stuff as the potential effect of a trap.
To a great extent that you want to. So you can lay as many traps as you want during a care crawl or whatever else you've got. So always just things for the Game Master to keep in mind, and players too to be aware of, in case they happen to think, my character's not feeling well. Why is that? Almost an hour in. We got one last thing to talk about before we cut this one off.
Real briefly.
Curses.
Yeah. Curses.
I haven't dealt much with curses in the game, so...
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of curses in fantasy fiction are pretty iconic in a way, but more or less it's curses generally will impose a penalty of some sort to tests.
Yeah.
There's and the degree
different kinds.
Yeah. I mean, like you've got sort of minor curses, which just impose a little bit of a penalty. You have major curses where things, might get even a little bit more serious. And then of course you've got horror curses, which,
what?
No. Like largely it's just a case of this is the sort of strange negative effects that you might have go on and are potentially just when you're starting to talk about curses in this regard, you're really looking at them potentially as a story device, as a plot hook or something along those lines that you're dealing with. And it's, what's the effect of it? How potent is it? At that point, basically, you sort of just like choose a step number that's sort of the equivalent of the spellcasting step for the curse in terms of it having its effect. And you just kind of go from there.
So let's talk about all three of them real quick, since we're just going to cross over an hour or so. So a minor curse, is like a -1 to -1 to -3 penalty. Lasts a little while. It's kind of a handicap for like, a week, month, something like that.
Well, it depends on,
Give me a ballpark step number you'd apply for that.
And typically these, this is like, you kind of take the stereotypical like D&D style cursed swords.
Yeah.
If there is a cursed item, if you retrieved an item from a care that is supposedly cursed, it might be that when you use the item, you suffer a penalty of some sort.
Fair.
Or something along those lines. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. This is more of like that knife is cursed, and when you use it, there's a chance, there's a penalty that you suffer, and you might have a secondary effect of, and if you roll less than a certain amount or whatever, you might accidentally cut yourself instead of what you intended to, like that sort of thing.
Fair. So major curses are more of a long-lasting impairment, so months on end, maybe up to a year and a day, whatever.
Yeah.
Give me a ballpark target number you'd use to apply this to somebody, to a player character in a game you were running.
Well, I mean, it would depend on the circumstances. This is something where it's essentially a major curse. I would start to bring those into like, these are the effects of other stuff, like where you're not bringing a horror, like a passion might curse somebody.
Fair.
And at that point, you're starting to look at story effects and maybe trying to determine what the mechanical consequences of that are.
Fair.
And at that point, again, you're starting to get into story area.
Yeah, this should be a major curse should be something like a plot hook.
Yeah.
And a reason to go do something else to remove that curse.
And again, like they can be associated with items still. They can be associated with places, like a grove that is cursed. And that could be something that potentially like the side effect of some kind of significant magic, especially like perhaps blood magic or a negative magical thing that was done in a location. And it might have a penalty that it imposes on people performing certain tasks in the area. And generally at that point, like you're looking at something a bit more severe than the minor, like 1 or 2 step penalty that you have from a minor curse. This might be something where you're taking 3 or 4 or 5 steps off of something, but generally it should be thematic and the numbers involved should be associated appropriately.
Fair. I was just going to ask about blood magic and major curses because I think they kind of go hand in hand, at least thematically and or mechanically, because I think that would be a wonderful way to work in a story foil and cause the player who's running the character to do a whole bunch of things differently and have to, I can't say work that off, but atone for whatever that was, overcome that curse and get their ability back or their spell back or whatever the case may be. So on to the last little part, horror curses. These are as unique as the individual horrors because this is the long game. This is not just this is a situation I want to hurt you for a while.
Yeah, this is generally the kind of situation where a horror usually marks a target or does some kind of significant magical working on a chosen victim in order to mess with them. Chantrell of Chantrell's horror, for example, is basically is kind of affected by a horror curse in a sense, that the horror has chosen them to be a particular victim and does stuff to mess around with that. There is a kind of a big gray nebulous area between actual like horror curses and just a horror being a jerk to a particular individual. Generally speaking, I would like think of a curse as something that the horror, I would think a curse would be more a situation where the horror kind of sets a magical effect or whatever on a victim and then just kind of lets it go, as opposed to like being a dedicated tormentor, like the despair thought, for example. What it does to an individual that it has marked is not a curse because it is deliberately like making that continual connection and imposition. Again, this is, especially when you start getting into horrors, this is what kind of weird, wacky, magical nastiness is, are you going to bring in as a story effect? Spoiler alert, I guess, minimally perhaps, but spoiler alert for the Blades of Carafad from previous editions. Yeah. There is a horror curse that is associated with those items, and the collection Blades revolves around resolving/removing that curse.
So again, not something to be taken lightly. I mean, poisons, traps, curses, and diseases shouldn't be taken lightly. You can kind of throw out traps and maybe they can mechanically break them down, use their talents to get past them. Poisons and diseases you should kind of lace in a little bit with more forethought, but curses I think are one of those you definitely need to have a little bit more preparation behind their usage if you're just going to think about casually tossing one into a game. Maybe not be so casual with it, but that's my 2 cents. So anyway, any final thoughts on any of these 4 bits of nastiness that the game masters can use or what the players otherwise should look out for?
No, I think we kind of covered all of that nicely.
Fair enough. So we're just a touch over an hour, not too bad. If you guys have any questions, guys and gals, don't mean to be gender wrong.
Exclusive.
Have any questions for us on any of these, please feel free to email us at anything else really. EDSG
you can email us
at gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Yes, indeed. So we are, if you missed it, one quick bit of news here as we wrap up. If you missed it, Empty Thrones, the official release, is available at facetgames.com through our web shop. The PDF is up and available. Pre-orders are open for physical books. You can, pre-order the bundle. The files have been delivered to the printer, and pre-order the bundle, get the PDF right away, and we'll ship you the physical book as soon as we get it in the warehouse. Kickstarter backers should have received the code to redeem to get the PDF for free from our web shop, because that is included if you got the book. And as I had mentioned, now that the book is out, we are looking at having an episode perhaps coming up here in the not too distant future where we will be discussing that book in depth. Less from a like plot spoiler kind of situation and more from a like behind the scenes development thing. But keep an ear out for that. That'll be showing up in your feed.
So I will be acting the part of anybody who has any questions for Josh or Kyle on that. And if you have any, send them to us. I'll ask the development team, aka Josh and Kyle, anything you want to know. And otherwise, I'll come up with a list of my own questions, and we'll see if we cross over anything.
Sure.
So get it into
that's
us
coming
quick.
up.
So once this episode goes up.
Yep, that was released. The Legends of Barsave Haven Volume 1, the collection of the first 8 chapters of the Legends of Barsave Living campaign, is also available. Champions Challenge Volume 1, the collected webcomic, is available. So we just had a whole bunch of stuff that went up live in electronic form and has physical pre-orders ready and waiting for you. So check those out at the website if you have not already been notified and made aware of their existence.
Yeah. So look at the FOSTA team here, rounding the third base, heading for home in the fourth quarter of 2020, bringing all kinds of product. So congrats on you and the team.
Hey, it is
everybody getting stuff
just
done.
In time to pre-order for delivery for hopefully at least for US backers for holiday shopping.
Gift giving. Get the gamer get the gamer you love something they want.
or treat yourself.
Absolutely. I always do. I've backed everything coming down the pike so far. So until next time, folks, it is time for you to go add a couple of knacks to your legend.
Good night, everybody.